MAGA pastor Mark Burns. He happens to be running for the US House in South Carolina's 4th district. Well, he was recently on Real America's Voice, and here's what he had to say.
Well, I'm gonna tell you right now, David, when I'm elected, I am going to help formulate and re-energize a committee called HUAC. HUAC is the House of Un-American Activities Committee. This is a committee, it is not a new committee. It was a committee that was during the time that existed in the 40s and the 50s, but it's a committee that is sole purpose is to identify Americans, media, elected officials who are doing un-American activities and to hold them for treason here in America.
Yep, that's what he would do. If he was uplifted to Congress, he would effectuate in bringing back that House Un-American Activities Committee from the mid-1900s. That's really interesting. And that would kind of make sense in bringing back something from the mid-1900s, given that Burns is aligned with Trump, whose goal was to bring us back to that era in time when everything was great again. Here's a photo of them. Because if you recall, Time magazine titled Burns as Donald Trump's top pastor. Yeah, it must be something closer to God by butting up to Satan. But let's go ahead and look at Burns's proposal to re-erect that whole House Un-American Activities Committee by exploring what this committee actually did back in the day. So per the Harry S. Truman Library, after World War II, the United States and the Soviet Union found themselves on opposite sides of a Cold War, which pitted the democratic United States against the communist Soviet Union. As the Cold War intensified, the frenzy over the perceived threat posed by communists in the US became known as the Red Scare. The United States government responded by creating the House Un-American Activities Committee, HUAC, which was charged with identifying communist threats to the United States. HUAC often pressured witnesses to surrender names and other information that could lead to the apprehension of communist and communist sympathizers. Committee members branded witnesses as red if they refused to comply or hesitated in answering committee questions. Yeah, that might signal to you, some of you all historians out there, or people like me who were raised in kind of a public school system and didn't learn much. But this is that whole McCarthyism thing, which last I checked, it wasn't that awesome. Where you could kind of point the finger at someone to silence them or condemn your critics. A lot of power, a lot of problems. Because we also know, per the Harry S. Truman Library, by the way, Truman, to my knowledge, was a president. Possibly, I don't know. Again, public school system. But essentially, he said during this time period, the lines of civil liberties and national security began to blur. The US citizens felt a sense of uncertainty. Some Americans felt that their personal freedoms were being taken away, while others believed HUAC and McCarthyism were necessary to secure national security. This is really interesting because, I definitely know that this Burns guy seems to be playing on our battle with Russia, but also playing on this idea that we can maybe just ruin lives and use a lot of control by way of our government actors. Yeah, kind of seems to be very much the Trump kind of way. Ben, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is honestly really terrifying to see because we're seeing a growing sentiment. And to be clear, this isn't even just a Republican thing. Democrats are doing this too right now because what you're seeing, especially as everything's escalating in Ukraine, you see the sentiment of responding to criticisms of the United States foreign policy. Like people want to talk about Yemen or Palestine or Libya, Iraq, Afghanistan. I mean, you name it, right? Almost half the world the United States has invaded. And you're seeing this sort of knee-jerk reaction start to bubble up. But what a lot of people also forget is what bubbles up along with that is actually really the main focus of the House Un-American Activities Committees then. And I would argue to say the push for them coming back now, and that was the weaponization of fear mongering about communism in order to suppress the civil rights movement, in order to suppress local labor movements, in order to suppress domestic efforts for justice and equality. And so, if for example, people are talking about, hey, look at China over there, they've got high-speed rail. Wouldn't it be cool if we have high-speed rail here? I bet you're gonna have like a ton of people who are like, oh my goodness, well, clearly they're working for Xi Jinping, and like we can't trust these people who are talking about public transit. We can't trust these people that are talking about like, police accountability or economic reforms or anything like that. And you're gonna see a rise in this. And I think the reason why they're sort of trying to drudge this back up is there's a huge mood shift in the country. This pandemic has revealed some of the most significant failures of capitalism. And as people are starting to question capitalism, I think the war in Ukraine is going to be utilized by a lot in the United States, both Democrats and Republicans alike, basically to be weaponized against anybody that calls for any systemic and economic change.
Yeah, for real. Like McCarthyism, that was some real cancel culture. The stuff that it seems that the Republicans are out here squawking about, nah, man. All you needed was a finger pointed at you and your stuff was just done. Your professional life, everything. They just call you a communist and boop, like you no longer exist. And so it just says a lot that this gentleman Burns wants to bring this back, where there were civil liberties and civil rights that were trampled on. And by the way, McCarthyism occurred before we had our civil rights era. So it's like you didn't even have all the protections, like Gideon v. Wainwright. You have, a right to counsel. All these things had not even been decided and really divvied out to the people yet. So if people thought your civil liberties were trampled back then, when you were operating with very little, come on now. To this day here, it's not gonna look good. So Burns can go sit somewhere and hopefully he'll be sitting somewhere far away with Donald Trump. Yeah, let's keep that together.